Good morning and welcome to this Crown Royal Water Break Wednesday. My name is Drew Dougherty. Over there is Deepi Sidhu. Deepi, it's great to see you. We're going to be answering questions from the fans, whether it's coming from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. And it could be Sweden, Spring, Conroe, Connecticut. Send those questions in. We've got a lot to get to. There's a lot going on in Texans land. But first things first, Deepi, how are you doing on this?
I'm doing Wednesday fantastic, Drew. I mean, we were working virtually Monday, Tuesday. So say we'll be back in the building. We got press conferences here in a little bit, shooting a show in a little bit. So normal week otherwise, other than the news that I'm sure we're going to get to, we're going to get questions about. Otherwise, a pretty normal week.
Yes. Wide receiver Will Fuller, cornerback Bradley Roby. They are on the suspended list now, and they're not going to play the rest of the season. So they are not going to suit up for the Houston Texans. Huge losses on each side of the ball, offense and defense. And you and I and Mark Vandermeer, we were talking about it last night on Texans radio, on Sports Radio 610 from 6 to 8. It's a big loss, and it's kind of debatable which side of the ball gets hurt more. I tend to think it's the defense, even though Will Fuller is having an all-pro season and is a phenomenal battery mate with Deshaun Watson. But I think losing a guy like Bradley Roby in this secondary with the secondary's depth or lack thereof, it really stings.
Yeah, we saw the few games where Roby wasn't playing. I mean, I just can't forget that Green Bay game when Roby went out on the first drive and Devontae Adams, what he was able to do that secondary. Now, maybe that was also because that happened so quickly on the first drive. There wasn't time to adjust or change the scheme once Roby went out. I don't know, Drew. I'm torn on this because I get your point. I agree with you, but I also look at the wide receiver group because a few weeks ago you had this embarrassment of riches of wide receivers, and now all of a sudden it's changed drastically. You've got Randall Cobb on IR. The Texans waived Kenny Stills just last Friday because Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller had been healthy all year, which is, kind of what Stills' role had been on this team, was to sort of step up when Fuller had been injured or banged up. And, he sort of does the same thing, but now you don't have him, and you've got Cooks, you've got QT, but QT had not even really been active most of this year. If one of those guys gets hurt, you're really hurting even more. But I mean, Fuller was coming off one of his biggest games this year, probably the second biggest game in his career. I think that Atlanta game a few years ago was bigger yardage wise and touchdown wise, but he was on such a roll. I mean, I feel like he was having an all-pro season. It kind of hurts me for him just because he was having such a great season and we all wanted to see him healthy and play well. I'm kind of torn, Drew. I think both sides of the ball get hurt because you've got two, of the players at the top of their position on this team that you lose for the rest of the season and for a game next year too. So I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, Drew, but I mean, this is bad news. I'm
right.
I know we were on the radio last night trying to be positive, and I was like, I'm still reeling from this a little bit.
Let's be positive. We got Johnny from Austin. He says who's going to play in place of Will Fuller. So let's be positive. You still have a guy in Brandon Cooks who's playing like a Pro Bowler. He's still there. And Kiki QT has been a factor the last few weeks in the slot. He is still there. Now, you're probably going to see more of Stevie Mitchell, who was pulled up off of the practice squad last week, and he was activated on game day at Thanksgiving. Will we see Isaiah Coulter, the rookie? He was still, on the inactives list last week, even though he's been on the roster. He might make it into things. Does Chad Hansen get a look? Or do the Texans just kind of spread it around more to guys like Duke Johnson, guys like maybe David Johnson if he gets pulled up off of IR? And their tight ends. They now have 4 tight ends, and all 4 of them were active last week, Deepi. So you've got some options there. And Joshua wants to know who replaces Roby. That's tougher. I don't think anybody can really replace Roby. Nobody can replace Will Fuller, but you still have other depth and guys that are still very capable that you can move around. It's a lot tougher on that side of the ball, I think, Deepi.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we discussed that last night as well on Texans All Access. Is it a scheme change? Do you have a couple of different guys? Is it zone? Do you go man-to-man? I mean, Roby was such a good man-to-man cover corner. I don't think there is anybody that can replace him. And you've got, a lot of younger guys behind him. Lonnie Johnson, the Texans moved to safety. I don't think we see him move back to corner. I mean, I think they like seeing him at safety. We all like seeing him at safety back there with Justin Reed. Maybe you got a guy like Eric Murray who used to play corner, who was drafted at corner. You move him back to corner. I don't know, but I think on the offensive side of the ball, you've got all those practice squad guys and a lot of younger receivers. But I do think that we'll see Deshaun Watson just continue to spread the ball around. I feel like the tight ends might have even been underutilized this season just because you've had your wide receivers so hot all year long. I mean, we know what Jordan Akins can do. We've seen what Darren Fells can do. I mean, I think we're going to see them get the ball more. I think Duke Johnson is a lot better out of the backfield catching passes. And well, shoot, now we know we can throw passes too. So I think the ball gets spread around a little bit more. I don't think it's one receiver that steps up for Will Fuller. I think it's sort of an offensive, shift. You see other position groups get it. I think you're right on the defensive side of the ball. There's a couple guys that we may see move back to corner, or they'll be younger guys, but certainly going to be hard to replace Roby.
All right, Zach has the most obvious, he has a question that has the most obvious answer. Zach wants to know, do you wish that DeAndre Hopkins was still here? Yeah, of course we do.
Of course we do. Yes.
Yes, we do. But he's not, and Arizona's not going to let him go. Alexis on YouTube has this. It's a good question, but any chance we bring back Kenny Stills, it would stun me because you're already paying him his entire salary because he went through waivers and nobody picked him up. So you're on the hook for his salary. So to get him back, you'd have to pay him another contract. And I don't think the Texans are going to do that.
I think that's just such unfortunate timing that he was released when he did. And the Texans, they didn't really know about Will Fuller until Will Fuller knew about his suspension. So I think had they known that, maybe things might have been different for Kenny Stills, but unfortunately they're not, so I agree with you, Drew. And I think if there was something to play for, I think if the Texans really pushing for a playoff spot, not that they're not playing for anything, but I think with each game that passes by, that final playoff spot gets a little bit more further and further out of reach. And I think right now the emphasis is going to be on seeing some of your younger guys play and getting them playing time and see what you have in a guy like Isaiah Coulter that hadn't had time to get on the field. So I think it's going to be about seeing what the younger guys have and who might be on this roster next year and moving forward.
Ben on YouTube, what's going to be the strategy in rebuilding the defense? It's a hell of a question, Ben. I think you got to wait first until you see who the head coach and the general manager are. But ideally and obviously, they got to get better in all three levels. They need to add more depth and they need to add more quality on the defensive line, in the linebacking core, and in the secondary. So they're going to try and take the best players available in the draft, clearly at those spots. And they're going to look to sign some key free agents at each of those spots too. So it's something that can be fixed, and it's a lot more fixable and a lot easier to fix than trying to find a franchise quarterback, which is what you have in Deshaun Watson. And he's not just a franchise quarterback. He's playing at an all-pro level. His passer rating is above 100. It's at 112 for his career, which is the second highest all time for anybody with a minimum of 1,500 attempts. He is unconscious right now, but Deepi, as far as rebuilding the defense, you got anything to add there to what I?
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you always worry when you have a new head coach come in. They sort of, get rid of veterans and guys that are taking up a lot of salary cap space. So I think that it's going to look that whatever the defense is, it's going to look very different because they need to free up some salary cap space to make room for depth and more. They're just going to need more of everything, more players. And I think the last few years, not having a lot of your draft picks, we've kind of known that the Texans needed pass rush help. They needed, help on the interior defensive line, but just didn't have a lot of draft picks. And that's going to continue through next year. So you're going to have to find those guys from somewhere. Maybe you find them through free agents. Maybe you sign somebody to a big contract, but you're going to have to free up some cap space before to do that. But I think the defense is going to be more of a rebuild. I mean, I expect a lot of changes there other than some of your cornerstone pieces that you already have in place. Yeah.
Steven on Twitter has this. What is the mindset of the team for the last 5 games? Well, clearly what we saw on Thursday, they had a lot of fun and they're playing a lot looser, playing a lot more effectively. And they've done that against the Lions and the Patriots. Now they're going to have to step up in competition with the Colts coming to town because that's a really good roster. That defense is pretty darn good, but that defense got to be smarting from giving up 40+ points to the Titans at home last week. Now they were missing some pieces, but hey, so were the Titans. The Titans were, limited on their offensive line. They had David Quessenberry starting his first game as an NFL pro after 5-6 years on the job. He was at left tackle. They still went bananas on the Colts defense. So as far as the mindset, they're talking about going 1-0 each week. And I know that's a cliche, but they're laser focused on just winning this next game. And Deshaun Watson, if you heard him in the post-game press conference against the Lions, he was talking about, hey, we want to win out. We want to try and get into the playoffs and try and, do some damage. But to do that, you got to win and focus on this next game. So there's no point in losing anything because your draft order is not going to rise. You don't have a first or a second, so it doesn't really matter in that regard. So let's win. And that's, I think, the mindset of the Texans over this next game and the last 5 as we are here in December, Deepi.
Yeah, I mean, I think also, why not put your best foot forward as far as these coaches, as far as these players, because they want to get some good film out there. I don't expect any of these coaches to stay here after this year. And I think a lot of them want to continue working in the NFL. So they also want to win games. I mean, their jobs are on the line, whether it's here or somewhere else. And same thing with the players. If they're not here next year, they want to be somewhere. And they want to be able to have teams go back and look at their film from this year and see the full potential they're playing at. I mean, players aren't going to just sit back because the record is what it is. I mean, just because this team is 4-7, there's a lot of pride on the line. People's livelihoods are on the line. So I think they want to win out. And, you're right. Why would you lose games just to give Miami a better draft pick in the first and second rounds? I certainly don't want to see that. I'd rather see them win and have a little fun. And you're right. Deshaun Watson is just playing out of his mind right now. And so if there's anything fun about this season, and there's really nothing been too fun about 2020, but there has been a lot of fun watching number 4 because you're right. He's unconscious. He's unconscious right now. Consciously unconscious. That's how well he's playing.
Yes. All right. Ryan on YouTube is going to close things out. And we kind of touched on it earlier, but Ryan wants to know, could Lonnie Johnson Jr. move back to cornerback? He could. I don't think you're going to see it, though, because based on everything we've heard Anthony Weaver say and Romeo Cornell say, he's a safety. That's where they want to keep him. They don't want to kind of confuse things, muddle the process. But, yeah, he does have a cornerback history. That's what he was drafted out of Kentucky as. And you might see him line up across a guy in a cornerback or as a cornerback situationally. But I don't think you're going to really see too much of that, if at all. He's a safety. So, no, I do not think he will move back to cornerback.
Yeah, I think long-term they want him to play safety. So there's no point in just moving him for these last few games. Just let him get the reps at safety, get a little bit more experience under his belt. He's still learning that position. I had a chance to sit down with him last week. He said he spent this entire offseason watching film, trying to get better at corner. He did not realize that he was moving to safety. So he said he put in all this work to get better as a corner, and then they move him to safety. So he's got some catching up to do. He's enjoying playing at safety. He likes the physicality of it. He's working on his communication with Justin Reed back there. So let them continue to do that because you can see it improving week over week. And, you're right. Moving him back to corner doesn't really help anything. It helps in the short term, but in the long term, I think it's best if you keep Lonnie at safety. You move him into the corner spot situationally, like you said, Drew. I agree with you there.
One of the evil twins, Lonnie Johnson and Justin Reed.
They're both evil. Right. They're both evil is what I learned.
Nothing evil about you or me, though. We're all for the sake of goodness here. Hey, please listen to Sports Radio 610 and Texans Radio every night at 6 o'clock. Also, send me a question. I dare you to send me a question on Dear Drew. Haven't gotten many questions this year. So go to the spot on HoustonTexans.com under the news tab, Dear Drew. You can send in all those questions. If yours wasn't answered here, I can maybe get it there. And Deepi, you've got Texans 360 this Saturday night. It's going to be a fun show. Extra Points will be on as well right before it. It's on ABC 13, KTRK, around about 11 o'clock after the games and the local news. And we can't wait to see it. It's going to be Travis Johnson, the former Texans first-round pick. Deepi, you have a good one. Thank you to Andrew Temperley, Amanda Caffey, and Tyler Marcotte for putting this Water Break Wednesday presented by Crown Royal all together. And thank you all for sending in these questions. We'll see you again very, very soon. So long, take care, and go Texans.